Hello, my name is Michael Schlacht and I'm a senior drilling engineer with Merlin ERD. And today I'll be talking about on-site operation support versus remote support and what are the differences and main challenges. In 2020, we had to switch our mode of operations from being on-site to remotely supporting jobs due to the pandemics. And when we were on site, we had all the data available to us. We had all the information available to us at our fingertips. We could also go and see things ourselves with our own eyes and touch things and make a proper interpretation. Now, with that interpretation, we were able to discuss the outcomes with various teams on site and also in the office. And that's a good situation to be because we could align the goals of various teams and we can bring everyone on the same page, which is an important part of our job. And everyone's goals were aligned and everyone knew what to do. Now, if we had any critical operation ongoing, we would be behind the driller and we would be his second pair of eyes, providing the real-time interpretation of the data for him and advising him real time. And if anything would go wrong, we would be able to instantaneously react and stop things or change things and discuss real time what needs to be done, right? So that's what we do on site, and that's the core of our on-site operation support, to bring various teams together to align the goal. That changes when we are supporting the job remotely. We still get data streamed to us almost real time with, I believe, a couple of seconds delay. But when we talk about videos or pictures of the cavings or what's going on the shakers and various different information which we would normally go and see with our own eyes, then that delay can take a couple of hours, and also depending on the internet connection at the rig site, then that delay could be even longer. But we still provide an interpretation of the things which are going on site, which can still advise whole condition monitoring. And most often we convey that message, that advice, to a single point of contact, which most often is the operator's representative on site. Now that person needs to convey the message further to the tool pusher, and tool pusher usually takes it to the driller or various other teams like directional driller or mud logger or the mud engineer. And our experience is that often there's a part of the message is being lost in translation. And part of it might be attributed to the fact that that person who conveys the message makes its own interpretation, or basically disagrees with our interpretation and doesn't want to implement the change. And it's easier to disregard that advice and to change that advice when person who made this advice is sitting 1,000 miles away and not in the room with you, and without the possibility to argue or trying to explain what's going on exactly. And that's the most important challenge when talking about remote versus on-site. And in a nutshell, how most remote support solutions work right now is that the rig will stream the data through the internet to various locations to anyone who has an access, and that data will be displayed on the monitor. And within 24 hours, based on this data, a report will be prepared, and there'll be various recommendations in the report, and these will be good recommendations and good interpretation of the data. Now, the first problem here is that there's a 24-hour delay. Obviously, if something's going on the rig side, there will be an action, instantaneous action. Someone will pick a phone and call back to the rig. But we've discussed that in the previous slide, that always is being changed or disregarded. So after 24 hours, someone will send a report to the rig site, and that report, whether it will be read or not, well, not necessarily will be read. So there is no value there, right? And there is a time and money spent, and a good information is provided in the report, but mostly it will not reach the people who need to read that report, and the interpretation will be lost in translation when various people will read and make their own interpretation. The best case scenario of remote support operations right now, which we observed on the market, is that various companies will have their representative on the site and also remote support operation centers off-site. And again, data will be streamed from the rig to various operation centers. And the first challenge is that there'll be a different data, or some service companies will focus on one part of the data and other service companies will be focused on different data sets. And they'll make this interpretation of the data with maybe sophisticated algorithms and machine learning and whatnot. And they'll provide feedback to their own representative, and the feedback will support their operations and their goals, right? And there'll be various competing goals on the rig side. So directional driller will have his own goals, the contractor, the drilling contractor will have other goals, and the operator will want to bring everyone together. But still, based on these interpretations made offsite, even if the feedback is instantaneous, because the directional drilling company offsite or in the office will often talk to the directional driller real time, that interpretation will only support his goals and will not be discussed with anyone else. So it's like having people on the rig side but operating within their own bubble and not connecting with the other companies and not discussing, how my operations influence your operations, how the changes which I want to make will influence what kind of effect it will have on your operations. Are our goals aligned? And that's a shame, because there's a really good knowledge offsite and there are a really good system to support people on site. But without that coordinations, without that sharing the data on site and also offsite, that goal is compromised. This is the first example of inefficiencies which we often experience when supporting the jobs remotely. So that was our client in South America, and that was a horizontal well being drilled. And we discussed the tripping procedures prior the well spot, and we discussed the tripping procedure prior to the section, start of the section. And driller was briefed on the tripping procedure as well. He was told what to do and what not to do and why. And we repeated this recommendation every time on the daily drilling report prior to the section and during the section, how to trip if we need to trip and what to watch for. And fair enough, the first trip attempt, and there was an overpull up to 70,000 pounds. And the tripping procedure was not followed after. So what we would usually do after encountering an overpull was not followed. And that's the most frequent feedback from our ERD advisors with regard to on-site remote support operations, that the procedures are not being followed and we cannot react instantaneously. Because when we see this overpull, it's already happening with a couple of second delay. So we can pick up the phone and call the rig and tell them what to do, but that message will take a couple of minutes until it reaches the driller. If we were on site, this situation would be avoided, and that's the main problem, being off-site compared to being on-site. Another example from the North Sea, we prepared best practices for drilling stringers and communicated this with the rig site while being on-site. And booklets were being issued with best drilling practices, and everyone was briefed how to drill the stingers. And fair enough, when it came to actually drilling through the stringers, the driller acted against the procedures, and in the result, string couldn't be pulled back through the stringer, and it was only free with 110 metric ton overpull. And in the result, there were some BHA parts from the RSS assembly lost in hull, and that resulted in sidetrack. And again, that situation, this sidetrack could have been avoided if we could act immediately, if we were sitting behind the driller, if we were analyzing data in on-site, and we could prevent that situation. We could remind of the procedures of the drilling parameters for drilling stringers real time, with 2 seconds delay if we only saw what the driller is attempting to do. Right, so that sidetrack would have been avoided if we were on site and not supporting the job remotely. Because all we could do remotely is, again, raise an alarm and say and communicate our concerns to the single point of contact. But again, that message is being diluted as it reaches the driller, as it reaches the directional driller, and as it reaches the tool pusher. So that's another example of disadvantages of remote support versus on-site support. Now on the next slide, I'll show you how we envision the ideal remote support setup that can prevent these kind of situations. And on this slide, you can see the feedback which we got from our ERD advisor when I asked them what's the most challenging and the most frequent challenge when supporting operations real time. And they say that the top one is the difficulty to reach decision makers instantaneously. It's impossible to reach the driller directly when he's sitting in the doghouse and for him to pick up the phone and talk to us real time. When we're sitting behind him during the critical operations when we are there, we can chat and he doesn't need to take his hands off of the joysticks. The second most frequent entry in that feedback was that the data is incomplete, that we often don't get all the data that otherwise we would gather ourselves on the rig. We are unable to go to the shaker house and take the cuttings into our hands and make the interpretation whether we are within the mud weight window or not, based on of what we see there. We cannot quantitatively assess the hole clearing based on what we could see on the shakers. Now we can ask someone to go there and tell us what's going on. We can ask for the pictures of the cavings, but this is not real time. This comes back with half an hour delay at best. The other problem is that sometimes internet connection is not reliable. That means if we need to get a big file, it takes hours. Sometimes we lose connection with the real-time monitoring system. And the last feedback is, we cannot jump into conversation which are being held on the rig site. So again, we provide our expertise, we provide our advice, and we communicate these messages with the rig site. And later on, there's an hour long discussion at the rig site what to do. And best case scenario, we are involved in a teleconference and we can freely discuss. But then, there's still a little bit of activities on site, which, are meetings here and a meeting there, and decisions are being made without our involvement if they don't want to involve us. If we're on site, we would be there, we would talk to people, and we would align everyone else's goals on the main goal, which is, drill the well successfully to TD without a train wreck. The solution to these problems, which we are trying to introduce and propose, is we call it digital presence at the rig site and offsite virtual cooperation. What it means is that there's a certain group of people who are supporting the on-site operations remotely, but they work together in one environment, one digital environment. They share all the data and they're present in real time in the same digital space. That could be done with just a teleconferencing software, or that could be brought to another level with VR software. But the idea, the philosophy behind it is that we all work together real time and we are present digitally real time and we talk to each other real time. And ideally, there's no need for extra personnel on site. Ideally, the directional driller could do his job from off-site location. There's no need for him to sit on the rig side because he can see all the data and communicate his advices from offsite locations. However, he needs to be present, he needs to be digitally present and available to other team members. And the same for us. We can support operations remotely, but we want to be present digitally, constantly, in real time, and communicate in real time with other people without the need for someone to pick up the phone and pick up the headset. At most, at the push of a button, we would be there and be able to communicate face to face. We could chat real time, we could see our faces real time, and that helps convey the messages, that helps to convey the interpretation that we make. And with low latency, with low delay, the information which we would see would be seen also on the rig side at the same time, so we could react almost instantaneously. And one could argue that digital presence could be substituted with, a very smart algorithm which would provide whole condition monitoring advice real time based on the data which is available at the rig site, in real time at the rig site. But the problem with that is that, and we thought about that we could just provide another screen to the driller which would tell him, for improving hole cleaning, you would need to increase RPM, increase flow rate, and things like that, right? And if he falls below a certain threshold, or if the friction factor rises, then there would be a message that you need to slow ROP right now, or you need to change your drilling parameters. And if the vibrations at the BHA increase, then he needs to do adjust the drilling parameters. Now the problem with that is that it would be just another 22nd, 25th screen in the doghouse, and that would be another alarm number 125, which the driller can just turn off and disregard. Because the problem is, sometimes he wouldn't understand why this is being proposed, or is it a valid alarm, because there's an algorithm behind that, there's a machine behind that, and not a human being who conveys the message and can discuss his concerns. We would rather have another monitor there in the doghouse where there's our face on it, and we talk to the guy, we have an eye contact, we talk face to face, and we would be there 24/7 if needed, right? So we would be part of the handover process. We would be part of the chit chat. We would be part of just discussing what's going on right now. If there's nothing wrong with the drilling process, that continue what you're doing. This is happening right now, and in 20 meters we're gonna drill into this formation. So start looking at this kind of things, and that's the real-time conversations which we have on site when we're providing the whole condition monitoring and URD services, and that needs to be in place for us to succeed in the future. Now, this is relatively an easy system to implement. All it requires is teleconferencing software and kind of a broadband internet speed, which is a problem, and it could be potentially a problem to have that digital presence on site. But I believe with today's technology it can be done, and the rig equipment manufacturers should look at increasing the broadband speeds for the rig sites and increasing the digital presence of off-site personnel at the rig site just for these purposes.